There's been a big resurgence recently of the sounds of the 1970s in both pop music and the indie scene. You've got Lord's Solar Power, Silk Sonic's An Evening with Silk Sonic, some people even calling Harry Styles' music 70s inspired, which, I guess, as someone who talks primarily about artists from the 60s and 70s, I do kind of long for the sounds and aesthetics of 50 years ago. The melodies, the harmonies, the sincerity of it all to seep its way back into the music of today. And while I do appreciate that many popular contemporary artists are influenced by this more classic sound and plenty of it is enjoyable, I really do like St. Vincent's latest album, for example, I still find a lot of it kind of derivative and safe. Lacking in the true originality and experimentation of the artist from that period. There may be a vintage mood involved, but the musical trends of today, the lethargic singing that comes out like a mumbly whisper, the heavy beats and dry synths that push out any kind of engaging melody are still most of what I tend to hear. And when it comes to lyrics, I'm often left equally uninspired when I learn that whatever love ballad I'm listening to was actually written by 9 different people, and stays in that safe zone of words and ideas from what the top 40 and much of the indie scene allows for. I rarely, if ever, hear an album that encapsulates and speaks to the wild times we're living in today as a Bob Dylan or Marvin Gaye did for people in the 60s and 70s. Or to put it another way, in the 60s it was very malleable and fun. In the 70s too, songwriting had a lot of space to be introspective and complicated, but still popular. A lot of money was given to weirdos in the studio to go and make their strange masterpieces, which you don't see as much now. That was definitely an all-time peak for the type of pop music I like. That was a quote from Natalie Merring, otherwise known as Weyes, who in 2019 gave us an album that exemplifies the kind of music I'd been searching for years. Her very own strange masterpiece, Titanic Rising. Weyes, a name taken from Flannery O'Connor's first novel, had made albums prior to 2019 which are impressive, but it's when she turned 30 and released Titanic Rising where her talents as an artist coalesced into something that is truly one of a kind. It recalls the musical palette of the Harry Nilsson and Carole King era, but where other modern artists tend to merely imitate the aesthetics of the past, Weyes Titanic Rising is entirely unique as it wades into the waters of the surreal and the sublime. Or as she describes herself, Bob Seger meets Enya. As soon as you hear her voice, I think you'll know what I'm talking about.
If I could go back to a time before now, before I ever fell down.
It's smooth and velvety, containing the elegance of Joni Mitchell and the laid-back alto of Karen Carpenter. It's the kind of voice that draws you in immediately and recalls a period decades before this one. The surreal nature of this record begins with the striking album artwork of Weyes floating in what she calls an idyllic childhood bedroom, a sacred space for many, and a reference to a major theme on this album, the millennial struggle. Growing up in the nostalgic wonder of the 1990s, only to discover that we were all being set up for disappointment as we got older. As she said in Rolling Stone, "I'd say the bedroom is almost like a subconscious realm of nostalgia, and the water submerging it is like the emotional trauma of adulthood, climate change, for real, actual rising sea levels." This shot was all done practically, by the way, which just further illustrates the lengths this artist is willing to go to create something special. Furthering the climate change allegory, Weyes, from an early age, had always been fascinated with the sinking of the Titanic, as well as the film of the same name for its, quote, grandiose story about the hubris of man assuming he could conquer nature, failing miserably, and the third class taking the hit for everybody. This is reflected in the ethereal centerpiece of the album, Movies. A song about Natalie Merring's love for films, but also her wariness of their double standards and false realities, as she sings,
"The meaning of life doesn't seem to shine like that screen."
It's just kind of damaging my expectations of reality, but I think since then I've come to really appreciate that form of escapism and the kind of damage they've done. So I have a very bittersweet relationship with movies overall.
The song begins with these mysterious, arpeggiated synths that sound like something out of a Hans Zimmer space opera. Lush, choral harmonies then transport us to a celestial world as the synths are swapped out for strings that drive the song to a wild and uplifting finish, creating a cinematic atmosphere that envelops you like the riveting finale of a spectacular movie, the kind that captured your soul as a child. This childhood nostalgia centered around the 90s, during a time where for a brief moment it seemed like maybe everything was going to be alright, forms the basis for the first song on the album, A Lot's Gonna Change. It opens with this strange, creepy synth, like a warped sample of an old Glenn Miller song. Sounds almost like it's underwater, bringing to mind the stunning album artwork, before we hear a solo piano line and the opening lyrics, "If I could go back to a time before now, before I ever fell down, I'd go back to a time when I was just a girl, when I had the whole world
gently wrapped around me."
Here, Wiseblood is communicating with her younger self, trying to inform her that a lot's gonna change. You're being sold an unattainable dream, but it's all gonna be okay. This is just a warning. The underwater synths return, sounding like the windscreen wipers of a car that's plunged into a lake. As Wiseblood sings about being born in a century, lost to memories, while the lush strings and harmonies build to a mysterious ending. Wiseblood, who wrote every song herself, isn't completely stuck in the past though. The track Every Day is about the futility of modern dating via apps like Tinder, as she sings how
True love is making a comeback.
that heavy, low opening piano line recalls the jauntiness of Harry Nilsson. But the rest of the song reminds me of the Kinks.
Keep her mind.
With the added touch of Paul McCartney's early 70s music. The song is kind of upbeat and bouncy, but with a slight melancholic nature to it. You've also got hints of the Beach Boys with the... This track is an excellent example of what this album does so well. Creatively use elements from the Great American Songbook, but with contemporary themes and situations. The euphoric climax at the end breaks apart, and we have the return of this murky, underwater sounding melody of a song yet to come, Wild Time. A track that most directly points to the bizarre state the world is in. Coming in sounding like a gentle Fleetwood Mac number, Wild Time highlights the response to the trauma of the late 2010s to turn the pressure of the world and your struggles into tougher armor. Otherwise, as Wiseblood sings,
You just made it complicated for nothing.
the line "living in the rising tide" is a nod to society drowning in overconsumption and oversaturation of products and media, but also the literal drowning of people due to rising tides brought on by climate change. This song is off an album from 2019, a time when America and the rest of the world was certainly in a contentious position where we didn't and frankly still don't know if we're all going to recover from what's already been lost. As Wiseblood evokes with the line, "No one knows just how we could have gotten so far from truth." This song only became more prescient 1 year later when the world was thrown into its wildest time in recent memory as the COVID-19 pandemic impacted us all in ways we're still reckoning with. A wild time to be alive, indeed. So far, the themes and the general direction of this album may be interpreted as rather depressing and existential, but the beauty of this record is just how filled with hope and joy it is. Having left behind the deeply Christian beliefs of her upbringing, Titanic Rising is all about Wiseblood searching for meaning to fill the void that religion left behind. Whether it's the salvation of movies or love, Wiseblood is just looking for
Something to believe.
the fourth track on this album, which features George Harrison-like slide guitars and a chorus of arpeggiated acoustic guitars that build to a swelling finish. This search for meaning is further explored on the track Andromeda, which when I saw her play this live, she described as sad cowboy music. In it, Weyes Blood wonders if anyone out there will see love, true love, as a priority, whether we can allow ourselves that kind of vulnerability or if it's worth just avoiding it altogether, as if it's as cosmically distant as the Andromeda galaxy itself. For anyone older watching this and rolling their eyes at us millennials feeling sorry for ourselves, well, Weyes Blood definitely opens the Kate Bush-like song Mirror Forever with a line straight out of the Boomer playbook.
No one's ever gonna give you a trophy for all the pain and the things you've been through.
This tongue-in-cheek acknowledgement of a widening generational divide is a subtle example of Weyes Blood's self-awareness and sense of humour on this album. Finally, we have Picture Me Better, about a friend of Weyes Blood who chose to end their life while the album was being made. It's more of a quieter lament than the rest of the songs on the album, as Weyes Blood waits for the call from beyond, a way to somehow connect with her friend who's passed. Or as she says, waiting for something with meaning to come through soon. The final official track on the album is an instrumental, where the melody of A Lot's Gonna Change can be heard in the form of strings, allowing the album to revisit its gentle beginning. The track is called Nearer to Thee and is named after Nearer My God to Thee, which was allegedly the last song the band on the Titanic played before the ship sank. So, I know this isn't the artist or album that you expected me to discuss on this channel. I probably could have got a lot more views talking about pet sounds or something, but I truly believe in this album so much and just want more people to hear it. If you're like me and find yourself always going back to artists like the Beatles, David Bowie, Patsy Cline, or anyone from that golden era of music, then I really think you ought to listen to Titanic Rising. Weyes Blood is an artist who truly deserves your attention. A musician who takes risks, from her intriguing chord changes and ethereal harmonies to her sublime instrumentation and bold subject matter. This month, she'll be releasing her follow-up to Titanic Rising with a record called And in the Darkness, Hearts Aglow. They're going to make up the first 2 albums in what will be a trilogy, further proving my point that Weyes Blood is an artist who thinks conceptually about her music, someone who strives to make something ambitious that speaks to the times we're living in, and in my opinion, sounding better than anyone else out there attempting to do the same. So, have you yourself heard Titanic Rising? Did it resonate as much with you as it clearly did for me? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what I do, please consider subscribing. I generally, like I said, talk more about older music, Beatles, Bowie, so if that interests you, there's a lot more videos I'm sure you'll enjoy. And if you really enjoy what I do and would consider supporting me, like these lovely people here, you can contribute to my Patreon page. The link is in the description. I've recently rejigged the tiers in my Patreon, so for example, my monthly Patreon video is now cheaper to access, as well as plenty of other new benefits as well. So thank you, Weyes Blood, for an amazing album, and for the rest of you, I'll see you next time.